In this last module, we are going to be integrating Jenkins with our GitHub webhook. So we'll be setting up a webhook between our Wanda Prep Terraform pipeline with our GitHub webhook. So for us to begin, we are going to create a webhook for our pipeline. So first, let's start by creating a Jenkins file within our project repository. So if you come back to our VS Code, this is our VS Code containing our project application file. We need to come back to the VS Code containing our project source file. So while we are in this VS Code containing our project source file, we are going to create a new file called Jenkinsfile. So you can click here and you select new file. Under the new file, you call the name Jenkinsfile. So once you keep the name Jenkinsfile, it's automatically going to appear with the Jenkins logo here, and you hit enter. So you create a Jenkins file. You see a newly updated file, which we call an on-track file called the Jenkins file. Now we create this Jenkins file. You come back to your Wanda Prep Terraform infra, which we have here. We click on configure, and once we click on configure, we are going to scroll down. You scroll down right to the bottom, and here while we are down right at the bottom, we are going to copy all the content of this. So you press Ctrl A, or you can just highlight. We're going to copy all the content of this pipeline. So I'll right click and I'll click on copy. I'll right click and I'll click on copy. When I right click and click on copy, I'll come back to the Jenkins file here. This is the Jenkins file. I'll equally right click and paste. So this is the same Jenkins file. Again, this is the same Jenkins file we have within our Wanda Prep Terraform pipeline. So I've copied the entire content of the file, and then I've come to a new file within my VS Code and I've created this file. Now, once you create this file, take note that this file will be pushed upstream to our project repository. This is our project repository here, which we created in the previous module, the Wanda Prep Terraform infra repo. So we are going to push this file to our project repository. For us to do that, we are going to open the terminal. We click on terminal, new terminal, and then we are going to do git status. So if you do a git status, you see that we have an untracked file here, which is the Jenkins file which we just created. So we are going to add this file to the staging area. We are going to do git add, and you do a dot, git add dot, and you hit enter. When you do git add dot, you see this file will show that it has been added. Once the file shows that it has been added, we'll do a git status again, git status, and you hit enter. You'll see that we have a new file that has been created. Previously, our Jenkins file was untracked. Now we have a new file that has been created. So once we have this new file that has been created, last but one thing which we are going to do is we are going to do a git commit -m, and then we give a message. You can give a message adding project Jenkins file, adding project Jenkins file. Once you do the message git commit -m adding project Jenkins file and you hit enter, you will see that we have one file change and a few additions. So if you do a git status again, you see we have nothing to commit because we've already added the file to our staging area and we have done a git commit. So the last thing which we are going to do is for us to do a git push, and for us to do a git push, we just put the command git push. Once you do a command git push, you should be able to easily push to the repository. So we've added our Jenkins file to our repository. If you come back here and you refresh the tab, you will see that we've added a new file, which is our Jenkins file. The Jenkins file has been added to our repository. Now, while we have the Jenkins file added to our repository, within this repository, we are going to come to settings here. Within our repository, our Wanda Prep Terraform infra repo, we are going to come to settings here, and we're going to click on settings. Now, when you click on settings, this basically contains settings and configurations for our Wanda Prep Terraform infra repo. And with these settings, we come to a section here called webhooks. We are going to click on this section called webhooks. This is the most important section as we are going to be integrating a webhook with our Jenkins server. So we click on webhooks here. It's going to open these webhooks. Basically, you say webhooks allow external services to be notified when certain actions happen. Now, when you add this webhook, you can click on add webhook. So we can adding the webhook requires some form of authentication, which we'll be putting in for our repository. So because my GitHub account has an authentication, I'll put in the authentication code to successfully get into my repository. Now, once I get into the repository, they tell you This is how you can add a webhook. We can have https example.com and then post receive. So what we are going to do is we are going to select this. Basically, the content should be the HTTP, the IP address of your Jenkins server. The content should be the HTTP, the IP address of your Jenkins server, and then port 8080 of your Jenkins server, and it should have this tag GitHub Webhook. So for us to have it this way, you come back to the tab where your Jenkins server is open, and you right click the IP component that has your Jenkins server public IP. So we are going to highlight this. Again, this is the tab that has a Jenkins server. We are going to highlight this. We are going to copy, right click, we click on copy. Once we right click and click on copy, we come back to where we are adding the webhook, and then we are going to highlight it same here, and we'll replace with that of our current Jenkins server. So if you paste it like mine and you have some these, you can delete the other tabs that are replaced in old, well, the other content that is duplicated. So basically, this is what your payload for the webhook should look like. For your payload, you should have HTTP IP address of your Jenkins server, public IP, and then port 8080 for the Jenkins port, and then you should have this tag behind GitHub-webhook. So once we have this, basically the webhook, we are not adding any secret. We just want to trigger this webhook when there are push events within our repository. Once you do this, you click on add webhook. So we came to settings, we click on webhooks, and then we add a new webhook. This will give us the possibility to add webhook. So they say this webhook has never been triggered. Now, once if there is successful connectivity between your Jenkins and your GitHub, you will see that there was a successful last delivery. You see a tick here. If the information is not correct, there will be no way for you to get a tick. You can check the details in the description to see how to effectively add a webhook. Now, once you've added the webhook, we are going to come back to our pipeline. Now, within our pipeline here, we are going to make some extra configurations. So we are going to select GitHub Actions here, GitHub project. So click on GitHub project. Now they're asking what is the project URL. We have GitHub project. What is the project URL? For us to get the project URL, we come back to our GitHub repository, and now under the repository settings, we click on our Wanda Prep Terraform Infra repo. We click here on code. We copy the repository link. Once we copy the repository link, we come back to our configuration here. Under the project repository, you paste this repository. So you're going to paste that of your repository, not that of mine. Once you're pasting this, again, you come to your GitHub, Wanda Prep Terraform Infra repo, you copy the repository link, you come back to your Jenkins, you paste the repo information here. And now you can allow this, because we set up our repo to be parameterized, you can allow this project is parameterized. And then how do you want to trigger this pipeline? What are the build triggers? So the build triggers, we are going to select that the build trigger here is the GitHub hook trigger for Git source code management and pooling. So we are going to select this under the build trigger. So you come under build triggers here, you click on GitHub trigger for Git SCM. Now once you click that, under pipeline definition, now we are no longer going to be defining it as a script. If you come to your Jenkins file here, we've put the script in the Jenkins file and stored that script in our repository. So we don't need to be modifying the script all the time directly from our console. Means that once we've integrated it continuously, every time we need to trigger the pipeline or make some changes to our Jenkins infrastructure, we just automatically do it here from our Jenkins file. So once you have this Jenkins file, we come back, we will scroll down. So instead of having pipeline script here, you right click or you click the drop down and you select pipeline script from SCM. So you're going to select pipeline script from SCM. Now when you say pipeline script from SCM, you must have a path. They say a script path. There must be a file called Jenkinsfile within the repository or the project where you have, or the repository which you're trying to clone from. And if you come to our repository, we have the file here, the Jenkins file. So once you have that and you have pipeline script from SCM, you have the script path, a Jenkins file. Under SCM now, you're going to click on the drop down and we'll select Git, because we've used Git to store our code. So we select Git, and then they'll ask now for the repository URL. So we'll paste again. This is the repository URL. We come here, you click on code, you click on copy. Under the Wanda Prep Terraform pipeline, under repository URL, you right click, you paste the repository URL, which is the repository URL, of course, for the Terraform infra repo. And then under credentials, initially we had created the credentials for Git once we're doing the checkout stage. So we'll select the same credentials which we use for the checkout stage. And then now, if you come to our repository here, you'll see that the current branch in which our project is found is the main branch. So this project is found in the main branch. So in our configuration here, we should change the branch here for master to main. If your branch is the master, you also want to maintain it as master, but if your branch is main as mine, you change it to main. And of course, the script path which we have is the Jenkins file. So basically, this is how a summary configuration should look like. We have pipeline SCM, we have Git, we have our repository URL, we have our credentials which we are stored when we're doing the Git checkout. The branch here is the main branch because our project repository is on the main branch, and then we have a Jenkins file within our project repository. If you have to go through the entire Jenkins configuration, we'll see there's a description. We are using a GitHub project. The project is parameterized. We have our build triggers, GitHub. We select under build triggers, we take GitHub hook trigger for Git SCM pulling. And then now for our pipeline definition, we have a pipeline being defined using from SCM. And then we specify the credentials for our pipeline. So once you have all of these, we click on apply. And we click on apply, we can click on save. So we click on save. Now we have our pipeline that has already been integrated with Jenkins. For us to test this, we can come back to our Jenkins file here. Under our code base, where we have our Terraform configuration, we can come here to the main.terraform, and easily we can change just the name just to have some configuration changes that we can use to trigger the pipeline. For us to have some configuration changes to trigger the pipeline, instead of us having the name here as app server, we can call this prod server, and then the tag too, we can have the tag as prod server. So once you do this, you'll see that the file here has been modified. So we have Wanda prep, instead of app server, we changed it to prod server for the resource name, as equally prod server for the tag. So once you do this, we open a new terminal. Under new terminal, we do a git add, then we do a git commit -m testing webhook, and then once we do that, the last thing which we'll do is we'll do a git push. So we'll do a git. The last thing which we are going to do is we'll be doing a git push. So I'll put the configuration to push into my repository. So once I do a git push, we will have successfully pushed to our repository. Now, once you push to your repository, you see our pipeline is in pending state. It automatically triggered the pipeline, and because it automatically triggered the pipeline, you see we do not need to click on build with parameters. Our pipeline has already been automatically triggered. So the moment you do a push into your repository, the moment you do a git push into your repository, it automatically triggers the pipeline here because you set up a webhook with GitHub integrating to Jenkins. And if you even look here, you will see that there is GitHub configuration which has already been added. So GitHub now, because we've set up a webhook, we've integrated it to the repository. If you click, it even takes you directly to the repository where you had set up your webhook. You can come back here to our Jenkins file. This is the Jenkins file. The build is currently running. If you scroll here and you open the console output, you see the configurations under the console output is actually 0 to change. So let's see, build by this. So it has successfully performed a build. If you come to AWS console, if you refresh AWS console, you will see that some two resources have been created. You see this is the Wanda Prep web server and the Wanda Prep prod server. So with this, we've successfully integrated a webhook where we added a Jenkins file into our repository. We added a Jenkins file into our repository. We came to our GitHub repository. We came to settings. Under settings, we're able to configure a webhook in these sections. We click on webhook. We're able to configure a webhook. And once we configure this webhook, we come back to our pipeline. Within our pipeline, the Wanda Prep Terraform pipeline, if you click within our pipeline here, within our pipeline, we're able now to configure our pipeline to make use of the configurations with respect to Jenkins. So we was able to use the configurations with respect to the webhook where we specified it as a GitHub project. We said this project is parameterized because we wanted to be able to do Terraform apply and Terraform destroy. And then we had build triggers. We set up GitHub hook trigger for our SCM. And we're able to set up our pipeline script where we specify that repository, we specify the credentials, we specify our branch as main, and then within that we had a Jenkins file. So if you save that, that's how we're able to successfully integrate our webhook to be automatically triggered, and then we get a notification on Slack. So this is how we can successfully build a continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline with Slack integrations and GitHub webhooks.